Hi, welcome to my channel. I'm going to be making this beautiful Christmas card using 2 stamps from Technique Junkies. Let's get started. I have here the Santa Sleigh new stamp from Technique Junkies, and it features this beautiful red rubber image of Santa and his sleigh. And the sentiment that I have here is Merry Christmas to all, and it says Merry Christmas to all and to all a good night. I also have some dies from I.O. These are some little Christmas trees. I'm going to create just a little scene, and I think the dies would look nice to frame it. And then I'm going to be using Catherine Polar ink and spruce to cut out my trees. Well, you'll see, I'm going to create my own paper. As far as for my sky, I did have these original colors picked out, but you'll see that I switched to a lighter color. I do have some Hammermill premium color copy cover paper, 100 pounds. And I'm just trying to visualize here the layout of my card so that I can think about spacing and where I want to place my 2 stamps. I'm also going to use some Shimmering Bliss sprays. First thing I'm going to do is ink drag this spruce ink from Catherine Polar across my Hammermill premium color copy cover paper. Why I'm doing this is I'm creating my own cardstock, colored cardstock. I don't have any cardstock that's this nice evergreen color, and I want my trees to look like the right color. So this is a very good way to just have the ability to make any color paper that you want. If you have Catherine Polar inks, which Technique Junkies sells them now, yay! You can do a lot with them, and I know that I've done different videos in the past featuring these inks, and I pretty much use them on every project that I create with. Once I have the piece of paper covered in that nice spruce color, I'll take my dies. There's 3 little trees, big, medium, and small. Take them over to my machine and cut them out, and then pull them off of the paper. I don't know if these little dies are still available. You might have some stamps that you could use with the Christmas trees or other dies from other companies, which is fine. You can use those, or if you have little dies like that from your stash, you can always use those. Now I'm just trying to get a feel for how I'm going to lay this card out. One of the things I want to incorporate is a moon, because I want Santa and his reindeer to be flying towards the moon in this card as they are delivering presents on Christmas Eve. So you see, I just go through a process here of getting everything lined up. I just want to make sure that I have adequate space for all these elements to fit nicely on the card without being too crowded. And I just want to give myself a visual picture of how things are going to look. Okay, now I'm going to ink blend my background. I'm using It's a Boy ink from Catherine Polar. The blue circle is actually the mask that I cut out with a die. I had created a panel off camera, and it was just too dark. The background was, you could see how dark that moon is, or that circle is. It was really too dark. So I switched over to a lighter color ink, and I'm going to be ink blending that over the entire card. This is just going to serve as my sky, and I will go in with another color ink here in a minute, but I wanted just to say about ink blending. It's very important to have smooth paper, and the Hammermill premium color copy cover paper is very smooth. That's Hammermill. I'll have a link to that below in my description. Smooth paper, and this one has just such a smooth touch to it. It's perfect. And make sure your ink pad has lots of ink in it. Make sure it's not dry. You want to have a juicy ink pad, not juicy to the point where it's saturated, but that you can get a nice amount of ink when you go ahead to do your blending. Now I have Juniper Mist ink, and I'm just going around the edges with that Juniper Mist. So back to the idea about getting a nice ink blended background. If your little ink pads or get too saturated, so you maybe add some ink and it's just too much, that's okay. Just take your ink dauber and rub it into the ink pad and then rub it off on a piece of paper. before you go against your project. So here's the juniper mist. It's kind of like dry, I think. So I pause and I go ahead and I add some ink to the juniper mist ink pad. And you'll see how much juicier it is now. Whoa, what a difference. Yeah, I have a little too much ink, so I do rub it off on my silicone mat. I'm trying to anyways. I recommend just grabbing a piece of paper, and if you have too much ink on your dauber, or just grab a card panel and just rub the ink onto that so you can get your dauber to be the sort of ink consistency that you like. Now I'm just making some streaks across and along the sides, and then I actually end up trimming my panel. And when you trim your panel is probably the best time to add the dark edges. That way it's not so white on the edges. But I forgot to do that with this card. I trimmed it, and then I didn't lose all of it, but I did lose some of this effect. I like it. I think it just kind of frames the scene really nicely. And of course the blue I think looks really pretty with that It's a Boy as my base, and then going in with the juniper mist. Now I have a fingertip dauber with a little bit of Twilight ink on it from Catherine Pooler. I did that off screen. It's a very light amount, and I'm just covering that white with the gray. And then I'm going to go in with Limoncello, which I had just refilled it, and it's way too juicy. Even just the little bit that I put on that fingertip dauber is just way too much. So I grab a piece of paper and I rub that just to get it off there, so it's just not so much saturated ink. You can see how far these inks go with just a little bit. Anyways, I've got a gray moon. I'm just going to go over it with this yellow. Sometimes I just keep my moons gray, but I wanted this moon to kind of have a yellow tinge to it. So it just looked like it was lighting up the sky, basically. Now it's time to stamp our sentiment and our Santa flying through the sky. I took a piece of acetate and I lined this up, and I did that off camera. I am actually stamping directly onto the card with Catherine Pooler archival ink, and my stamp is skipping in a spot. The one reindeer's leg seems to be indented inward instead of outward, and so I was trying to press really hard just to get that, but you're not going to really notice it on the card. Sometimes that happens with red rubber stamps, and sometimes with photopolymer stamps as well. All right, so I've got my piece of acetate, I've got my sentiment. I'm trying to line it up so that whenever I go to stamp it, it's nice, it looks good, it's a good position, and using the acetate really helps a lot. So I think I finally got I think I finally got the right spot. It took me about 3 times, but I just wanted you to see that it's okay to use this acetate to line things up. With photopolymer stamps, you can see through, but with the red rubber stamps, you can't, but you get amazing detail. So I love red rubber stamps, and I love the Technique Junkies brand. And I wanted to let you know that if you are interested in these stamps or any stamps from Technique Junkies, I have a discount code that you can use on your order. It's TJ10 Tracy, and I'll have that listed below in my description box. Okay, I have some Barely Art glue. I'm going to just adhere my Christmas trees to the corners here. I'm just layering them, and they're already, as you know, pre-inked, so they're nice and dry now. I definitely would recommend letting them dry before you run them through the die cut machine, because they might get stuck inside your dies with that moisture. You don't want that to happen. Okay, now you can take your scissors and trim off the excess, and you want to trim off any remaining trees that are hanging off the side, and that'll make it nice and flush with your card panel. Okay, now we're going to move on to the part where we apply shimmering bliss spray to the project. I'm using golden olivine and iridescent shimmering bliss sprays, and I'm just putting a little bit into my empty palette. Starting with golden olivine, I have a small brush, and I'm just going to paint that shimmering bliss directly onto the Christmas trees just to make them look nice and shimmery. The golden olivine is just a cool color. It's a golden greenish color, and I think it's going to be perfect for a lot of holiday cards because it just provides just the right amount of golden olive, as the name implies. And I like the way that it looks on these trees. I know you really can't see it very well. You can see it much better when it dries. And of course, it's always hard to see it on camera, but I do have a picture at the end of the video, which is a still shot, and it hopefully will show you just a little bit more detail. Now let's add the iridescent, which is a nice clear color with lots of shimmer to it. You see I'm shaking up, well, you don't shake, you roll it in between your hands, my shimmering bliss sprays ahead of time, and then I'm using a pipette, which is a plastic dopper that is long and it reaches inside bottles, and I'm using that just to get a little bit of the shimmering bliss spray out and into my palette. And you want to stir this frequently. That'll stir the mica up while it's inside the little palette well. And taking a picture, it looks like. And I start by applying it to the moon. Again, this is an iridescent topper that you normally would spray on top of your project. And I am just putting it on my moon to give it some shimmer. I pick it up every once in a while and turn it side to side just to get an idea of what I'm looking at. Trying really hard not to cover up any of the images that are stamped, and just to apply the shimmer around the reindeer and around the sparkle. And this is when it helps to have a very fine tipped paintbrush that you can use for this type of application. In case you're wondering what sparkle I meant, if you look underneath Santa and his reindeer, you'll see little dots. And I guess in my mind, I imagine that was sparkle. So if you ever watch a children's cartoon and you see Santa taking off in the sky, a lot of times there's just some imaginary glitter or sparkle that trails with them. But then again, it could just be snow. Either way, it's fine. I am going to be adding snow when I finish this part. I'm going to be using the shimmering bliss spray to create snow. All right, so I'm going to grab an acrylic block or two, and I try to isolate the area where I am applying the shimmer. I have a fan brush and some water, and then of course inside that well I have the shimmering bliss spray. And I first just try to flick the straight shimmering bliss spray, but then I realized I definitely need to add some water, so I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Again, taking a pipette and just putting a little bit of water there. And it was a clean pipette. It's not the same one that I was using for the shimmering bliss. And just flicking that right off of that acrylic block. And you can use a splat box if you want. I'm pretty close to the bottom of the area. So basically what I mean is my brush and my block are super close to the silicone mat. So I think if you hold it up really high, you definitely need to have a splat box. But lately I haven't been using one, just for these little applications of sparkle or snow or whatever you want to call it in these little tiny sections of the card. I'm not trying to cover the entire card because I don't want to cover up anything that I have inked already. I don't want to cover up Santa or Sleigh or even the sentiment. I don't want to necessarily cover up the moon. Just would like to cover up the areas in between. Not cover up, but accent the areas in between with some Shimmering Bliss spray. Now that is done. I'll let that dry. I had some beautiful holographic foil cardstock, and I cut 2 frames. And because when I was looking at my card, I thought this just looks like a classic Christmas type a greeting card, or even a decoration that you would see in somebody's house at Christmas time. I guess it kind of reminded me of Currier and Ives, or I don't know, some kind of retro or vintage, not retro, but vintage look. So what I'm doing is this holographic cardstock, again, is just beautiful. It's from Sizzix. So I put the 1 frame flat down on the cardstock, and the second frame I'm going to put foam all around the edge, and that's going to give it some height and dimension. That way my 2 frames will be not exactly flush with each other. The one will be slightly raised above the bottom one, and then I'll also put foam, piece of fun foam, behind my card panel that I just decorated, and that'll give that some height as well. So it's not all laying flat on the base of the card. And my card base is black. So let's go ahead and get this foam tape pulled off. Norman Rockwell, that's who I was thinking of. The stamp and sentiment and the way it looks reminds me a little bit of a Norman Rockwell type vibe, I guess you can say. All right, so I'm just trying to figure out how to line this up so I don't have too much of a overlap. I don't really want them to overlap. I want there to be a pop. So I thought, well, I'm gonna go ahead. I have a fun foam on the back of this, and I just trimmed the fun foam down to fit this size panel. I just get big sheets of fun foam at the big box craft store. And this is kind of something that you need to put a little bit of weight on and just let it dry on its own. Don't mess with it because it'll definitely slide away, and it'll just takes a little bit to dry because, as you see, I pick it up and I think, oh, is it dry? No, it's not dry yet. You need to give it some time to really dry. But one thing, you've got a little bit of wiggle time. You can readjust it if it doesn't look straight to you. And I'm just adding some pressure here with these blocks. I'm trying to get that foam to stick. Okay, let's take a look at the finished product. I just love this picture. I love the way it just sparkles and shines. I think the frame and the way that I applied the snow to the panel just really makes it pop. Here's a close-up of those trees that I applied the Shimmering Bliss spray on. You can kind of see how they're shiny. Thanks so much for watching today. I'd love it if you'd give me a thumbs up and leave a comment. If you're new to my channel, please subscribe. And again, I'd love it if you would comment. I read all of your comments and I appreciate them so much. And I appreciate each and every one of you who took time out of your schedules to watch my video. Thanks so much and have a hopeful day. Bye-bye.